On Galactic Outpost Theta-9, nestled in the armpit of the Andromeda Galaxy, there lived a monster. At least, that's what everyone called him. Krag Daniels stood 6'2", with a frame that could charitably be described as alarmingly dense. His skin lacked the proper translucence of civilized beings, instead presenting as an opaque brownish tone that simply absorbed light rather than allowing it to pass through as nature intended. Most disturbing of all, his face featured a horrifying split that occasionally widened to reveal rows of calcium deposits arranged in perfect killing formation. The residents of Theta-9 called this expression smiling. They also called it absolutely terrifying and please make it stop. "I'm just trying to be friendly," Krag muttered to himself as he strode through the central promenade, watching alien parents hurriedly usher their spawn to safety. With each step of his abnormally solid legs, the floor vibrated slightly, another offense against galactic sensibilities. 3 young Zelbian children, each barely 3 feet tall with shimmering blue translucent skin, stared at him from behind a nutrient dispenser. They whispered among themselves, their 8 eyes collectively widening with fear and fascination. "Is it true humans drink acid?" one brave soul squeaked. Krag sighed. "It's called coffee." And he caught himself and forced his face into neural flatness, suppressing the smile that had sent a Vorgan diplomat into cardiac arrest last month. "It's not acid. It's just hot bean water." "Hot bean water?" The children exchanged horrified glances. "You boil plant embryos and consume their essence?" "Well, when you put it like. It's going to eat us." The 3 Exelbians scattered, their gelatinous appendages flailing in terror. Krag exhaled slowly. A practice station-mandated therapist had recommended for managing what the galactic community called dangerous emotional outbursts and what Krag called basic human reactions. "Fascinating. Your respiratory control remains one of your species' most alarming features." The voice came from behind, high-pitched and clinically enthusiastic. Krag didn't need to turn around to recognize Dr. Vexaplix, Theta-9's resident exobiologist and self-appointed human expert. The Arcturian scientist stood barely 4 feet tall, with an oversized cranium housing 4 independently functioning brains and skin that shifted colors based on intellectual excitement. Currently, she was a vibrant purple, her studying the human color. "Hello, Dr. Krag said, carefully maintaining vocal modulation within the non-threatening range. Didn't mean to scare the kids." Vexe circled him, her compound eyes rapidly photographing his posture from multiple angles. "Oh, don't apologize. Their fear response is perfectly natural. After all, your species evolved as apex predators on a death world of such horrifying conditions that most civilized beings can't even comprehend it. Earth isn't that bad. Your planet experiences regular bombardment from space debris, violent atmospheric disturbances, and tectonic instability so severe that entire land masses move." Vex's skin brightened to near ultraviolet. "And that doesn't even address the evolutionary aberrations that allowed your kind to survive internal calcium-based support structures, hemoglobin-based oxygen transport, and the ability to repair tissue damage through cellular regeneration." Krag rubbed his neck. "You make healing sound like a war crime. Most species have the decency to die when severely damaged." Vexe tapped furiously on her datapad. "But humans just grow back. Horrifying." "Right, well, this horrifying human needs to get to work." Krag stepped around the scientist, who was now scanning his alarming locomotion method with 3 different devices. "Wait," Vexe called after him. "I haven't measured your explosive strength capabilities today." But Krag was already gone, leaving behind only the faint vibration of his footsteps and, according to Vex's readings, a body temperature so high it should have cooked him from the inside out. Just another day as the station's resident monster. The maintenance bay of Theta-9 was, like most things designed by committee, a spectacular failure of efficiency disguised as innovation. Angles of multicolored tubes ran in every direction, presumably carrying important fluids to important places, though no one seemed quite sure which was which. Panels blinked with urgency that had long been ignored, and automation that should have made everyone's job easier mostly just created new problems to fix. It was, ironically, the perfect place for a human. Krag, thank the 7 moons you're here. Technician Glorn, a gelatinous mass of transparent organs barely contained within a maintenance uniform, oozed anxiously beside an open panel. The atmospheric regulator is making the death sound again. Krag cocked his head, hearing the distinctive grinding noise that meant metal was touching metal in ways that engineers had specifically designed it not to. That's not the death sound, Glorn. That's just a loose coupling. But the manual says if it makes that sound, we must evacuate and call for emergency response. The manual was written by bureaucrats who've never fixed anything in their lives. Krag grabbed a toolbox, his personal one, built to accommodate his alarmingly dexterous fingers rather than the standard tentacle grips or telepathic interfaces. I'll have it fixed in 5 minutes. Lorne's respiratory sac inflated with anxiety. But protocol states. Protocol would have us evacuate half the station. Because someone didn't tighten a bolt. Krag slid under the panel and eyed the loose coupling. Besides, protocols are written assuming normal species limitations. I can handle a little coolant leak. But coolant is toxic to most carbon-based. A splash of blue liquid sprayed out as Krag adjusted the coupling, droplets landing on his exposed forearm. Glorn's entire body paled to near transparency in horror. Medical emergency. The human is contaminated. Krag rolled his eyes, wiped the coolant off with a rag, and finished tightening the coupling. The grinding noise stopped immediately. Coolant just gives me a mild rash, he explained, rolling down his sleeve. Nothing to worry about. Glorn's eye stalks trembled. Your ability to withstand chemical exposure is distressing. Thanks, I grew up on Earth. It had become Krag's standard response to any comment about his physical abilities. The phrase never failed to elicit nervous trills from his co-workers, who had all seen the educational videos about Earth's uniquely hostile conditions and the evolutionary horrors it had produced. As Krag closed the panel, a small figure darted out from behind a stack of supply crates. That was amazing. The voice belonged to Drell, a Proximan maintenance apprentice who stood 3 feet tall with 6 limbs and a perpetually excited expression. Unlike most station residents, Drell's response to humans was unbridled enthusiasm rather than terror. I've been studying the manuals, but they never show practical applications like that. How did you know the coupling was loose just from the sound? Krag smiled before remembering and quickly neutralized his expression. Too late, Glorn had already retreated several feet, trembling. Experience, Krag answered, handing a wrench to one of Drell's middle limbs, and listening to the machinery. Sometimes you need to feel the problem rather than just scan it. Feel it? You mean with touch receptors? Drell's eyes widened with excitement. Most species avoid direct tactile input due to pain sensitivity. Humans are weird that way. We like to get our hands dirty. Drell looked at his own smooth, sensor-covered appendages. I wish I could be more like a human. No, you don't, said Glorn, who had recovered enough to rejoin the conversation from a safe distance. Humans are apex predators with redundant organs and digestive systems capable of processing substances that would dissolve most species' internal structures. Exactly. Drell bobbed excitedly. Isn't it wonderful? Before Krag could further corrupt the youth with human barbarism, the station's communication system crackled to life. The administrator's voice echoing through the maintenance bay. Attention all personnel. This is an important announcement. The Galactic Diplomatic Corps has informed us that a high-level delegation will be arriving at Theta-9 tomorrow for a 3-day inspection and cultural exchange program. All departments are to prepare accordingly. And would human. Resident Krag Daniels please report to administration immediately. Glorn's body rippled with what passed for a sympathetic expression. Oh my. The delegation. Do you think they're going to put me in storage for the duration of the visit? Krag sighed. Probably. But that's not fair. Drell protested. You're the best mechanic on the station. I'm also a terrifying reminder of what happens when evolution takes a wrong turn into survive at all costs territory. Krag wiped his hands. Better go see what the administrator wants. As he headed for the exit, Krag heard Drell ask Glorn, "Do you really think they'll hide him away?" "Of course," Glorn replied. "Would you want diplomats to know you had a human on your station?" Administrator Plink was a cephalopoid from the Rigel system, essentially a highly evolved octopus who had traded ocean life for bureaucracy, which most humans would consider a poor exchange. His 8 limbs were currently engaged in multiple tasks, signing documents, adjusting his uniform, reorganizing his desk, and most impressively, wringing themselves in anxiety. "Ah, Human Daniels, thank you for coming promptly. Please sit. Over there." Plink gestured to a chair positioned at what Krag recognized as the administrator's calculated safe distance from his desk. "Is this about the delegation?" Krag asked, lowering himself into the too small chair. "Yes, indeed." Plink's color shifted between professional blue and anxious green. "As you know, diplomatic visits are crucial to our station's funding and reputation. The delegation includes representatives from 7 major galactic powers, including—" His voice dropped to a reverent whisper, "the Arcturian High Council." "Sounds important." "Important doesn't begin to describe it. This could mean expanded trade routes, technological exchanges, and most crucially, a higher administrative rating for yours truly." Plink's suckers puckered nervously. "Which brings me to the uncomfortable matter at hand. You want me to make myself scarce?" "Not precisely." "Well, yes, precisely. But I was hoping to phrase it more diplomatically." Plink slid a tentacle across his data terminal. "We've arranged temporary accommodations for you in the maintenance sublevels." Krag leaned forward to look at the schematics, causing Plink to involuntarily squirt a small amount of ink. "You want me to live in a storage closet for 3 days?" "It's a very spacious storage closet. We've installed a sleeping platform and nutrients dispenser." Plink's color shifted to appeasing mauve. "The delegation simply isn't prepared for, well, a terrifying death world monster?" "Your words, not mine. Though yes, essentially correct." Plink sighed, a peculiar sound coming from a being without lungs. "The fact is, most delegation members have never seen a human in person. Their first exposure shouldn't be on a crowded station where misunderstandings could occur." Krag crossed his arms, another gesture that made most aliens uncomfortable due to the alarming flexing of biceps. "Like the misunderstanding where they think humans aren't sentient enough to be treated with basic dignity? Now, no one is questioning your sentience. Your intelligence is quite remarkable given your evolutionary background." Plink's tentacles fluttered apologetically. "It's just that you're so scary? Physically intense. You contain solid bones. Your blood is red with iron. Your teeth are permanent fixtures designed for tearing flesh. You perspire excess water through your skin." Plink shuddered dramatically. "Forgive me for saying so, but by galactic standards, you're basically a walking biological weapon." Krag sighed. He'd heard it all before. Too strong, too dense, too durable. The fact that he could lift 3 times his body weight, survive in atmospheric conditions that would kill most species, and heal from injuries that would be fatal to others made him an evolutionary aberration in a galaxy where most intelligent life had evolved along more delicate lines. "Fine," Krag said finally. "I'll take a shuttle to the nearby trading post for a few days. Spare everyone the horror of my solid skeleton." Plink brightened immediately, his skin turning a relieved yellow. "Excellent. I knew you'd understand. The station will cover all expenses, of course, and—" The communication terminal chimed urgently. Plink extended a tentacle to activate it. "Administrator Plink," came a formal voice. "This is Ambassador Zorn's attach. I'm forwarding the delegation's final itinerary and special requests." "Special requests?" Plink's colors swirled anxiously. "Of course, we'll accommodate whatever the delegation requires. The ambassador has been informed that your station hosts a human resident. Ambassador Zorn specifically requests a meeting with this individual as the centerpiece of the cultural exchange program." The office went silent. Plink's entire body drained of color until he was nearly transparent. His mouth opened and closed silently several times before he managed to speak. A meeting? With our human? As the centerpiece? Correct. Ambassador Zorn has a particular academic interest in Earth species and considers this a unique opportunity. Will this be a problem? Plink's eyes darted to Krag, then back to the terminal. No problem whatsoever. We're delighted to feature our human resident in the program. After the call ended, Plink collapsed into a boneless heap on his desk. We're doomed. Lay. Krag couldn't help it, he smiled, causing Plink to flinch violently. Look on the bright side, Krag said, deliberately showing his teeth now. At least you don't have to clean out that storage closet. The diplomatic shuttle docked with Theta-9 amid considerable pomp and circumstance. Every available staff member had been polished, briefed, and positioned along the reception route except for Krag, who had been sequestered in a preparation room with Dr. Exa and 3 cultural advisors. Remember, said Advisor Thriel, a willowy being with translucent skin and nervous mannerisms, no sudden movements, no showing of teeth, no mentions of Earth's predatory ecosystem, and absolutely no demonstrations of strength. So basically, Krag replied, don't be human. Precisely. Vexa chimed in helpfully, adjusting sensors attached to Krag's temple. We've prepared a mild sedative to reduce your more alarming physical capabilities. Krag removed the sensors with a decisive motion. No drugs. If the ambassador wants to meet a human, he gets an actual human, not a sedated approximation. But your natural state is so, Thriel searched for a diplomatic term. Horrifying, Krag suggested. I was going to say intense, but yes. The door slid open, and Administrator Plink oozed in, his formal attire barely containing his anxious writhing. They're here. The ambassadorial party is proceeding to the conference room. He looked at Krag with all 4 eyes. Are you ready? Please say you're ready. Please say you won't do anything, human. I'm ready, Krag affirmed, straightening his specially designed formal wear and outfit that minimized his muscular physique and included high neck coverage to hide his disturbingly exposed skin. And I'll be on my best behavior. Oh, stars above, Plink moaned. We're all going to lose our certifications. The conference room had been transformed for the occasion. Ambient lighting was adjusted to the preferred spectrum of each species present. Temperature zones created microclimates throughout the room. Even the gravity had been fine-tuned in different sections to accommodate various physiological needs. Ambassador Zorn dominated the center of the room not through size, as the Merovian diplomat stood barely 4 feet tall, but through sheer force of personality. His iridescent scales shimmered with self-importance as he gestured dramatically with upper limbs while his lower ones remained clasped in formal posture. Administrator Plink. How delightful to finally visit your quaint station. The ambassador's translator conveyed his tone perfectly condescending with a hint of boredom. I've been touring facilities across this sector, and I must say, yours is certainly one of them. Ambassador Zorn. What an honor. Plink performed an elaborate greeting ritual involving multiple limb positions. Theta-9 welcomes you and your distinguished delegation. Zorn's compound eyes swept the room impatiently. Yes, yes. Now, where is this human I've heard so much about? My xenobiological studies would be incomplete without examining a specimen from Earth. Krag stepped forward from the shadows where Plink had unsuccessfully tried to hide him. I'm Krag Daniels, Ambassador. Station maintenance technician and resident human. The room went silent. Several delegation members visibly recoiled. One small aide fainted outright, caught by security personnel before hitting the floor. Ambassador Zorn, however, leaned forward in fascination. Extraordinary. It's even more impressive in person. Look at the solid structure, the dense musculature, the alarming bilateral symmetry. Thank you, Krag responded, uncertain whether he was being complimented or cataloged. Can it perform feats of strength? Zorn asked Plink, as if Krag weren't standing right there. I've heard humans can lift many times their body weight due to their barbaric evolutionary path. The human, I mean. Mr. Daniels is a valued member of our maintenance team, Plink said nervously. But perhaps we should proceed to the refreshment area for the cultural exchange portion of our program? Excellent idea. Zorn clapped his upper hands together. I want to observe the human's consumption process. The refreshment area had been carefully prepared with appropriate food for each species. Krag's section featured what the station's culinary unit believed approximated human cuisine nutrient cubes in various earth tones arranged in symmetrical patterns. Ambassador Zorn watched intently as Krag sat before his meal. I'm particularly interested in your species' unusual ingestion methods. Please demonstrate. With everyone staring, Krag picked up a brown nutrient cube and took a bite. The taste was indescribably bland, like someone had described wheat to a computer, and then asked it to recreate the concept using only minerals and air. Fascinating, exclaimed Zorn. It uses exposed calcium structures to mechanically break down nutrients before internal processing. So primitive yet functional. Krag swallowed, the simple action causing several delegation members to shudder visibly. On Earth, we generally prefer our food to have flavor. It speaks of preferences. Remarkable adaptive behaviors. Zorn turned to his attach. Make a note the creature retains vestigial desires despite living in civilization. Dr. Vexexa, who had been hovering nearby taking readings, stepped forward eagerly. If I may, Ambassador, I've been studying human Daniels extensively. Their species demonstrates numerous evolutionary anomalies that make them uniquely suited for survival in hostile conditions. Go on, Zorn encouraged, his scientific curiosity piqued. For instance, Vexa continued, her skin coloring with academic excitement. Humans possess an endoskeleton of calcium deposits rather than the more civilized exoskeleton or fluid support systems. This allows them to sustain damages that would shatter more advanced beings. Hey, Krag interjected, we're not damage-proof. We just end their reproductive process. Vexa continued, oblivious to Krag's discomfort and Plink's increasingly frantic gestures to stop. Completely internal fertilization followed by live birth of underdeveloped offspring. The females actually expand their bodies to accommodate growing young and then forcibly expel them through a dedicated exit port. Several delegation members gasped in horror. A Venusian diplomat turned a sickly shade of green. That's enough about human reproduction, Krag said firmly. But I haven't even explained how your species creates specialized fluid to sustain the underdeveloped offspring from modified sweat glands. What? A Rigelian delegate stood up in alarm. It feeds young from sweat modifications? Anatomically speaking, mammary glands or Vexexa began. Moving on. Administrator Plink interrupted desperately. Perhaps we should discuss the station's technological achievements instead? But the damage was done. The delegation was now staring at Krag with a mixture of horror, disgust, and morbid fascination. One delegate whispered loudly, "Do you think it's safe to have it here? What if it gets hungry?" Krag sighed internally. He'd faced these reactions his entire life off Earth. To most galactic citizens, humans weren't just aliens, they were evolutionary nightmares. Endoskeletal, self-healing predators from a planet so hostile that most species wouldn't survive a day there. Ambassador Zorn, however, seemed delighted by the controversy. Administrator, your human is even more primitive than the literature suggested. To think the galaxy once feared that Earth would produce dangerous expansion-minded predators, when in reality, they're simply fascinating evolutionary throwbacks. Krag clenched his jaw, another action that sent ripples of anxiety through the watching crowd. Tell me, human, Zorn continued condescendingly, do you find it difficult to comprehend advanced concepts with your predator brain? I understand Earth education focuses primarily on not being eaten by your fellow planet dwellers. That did it. Krag stood up a simple action that nonetheless caused 3 security officers to activate their shields and Ambassador Zorn's personal guard to step forward. Actually, Ambassador, Krag said with deliberate calm, Earth education covered everything from quantum physics to interspecies diplomacy. Which is why I know you're being intentionally provocative to gauge my reaction. The room went silent. Zorn's scales flashed with surprise before settling into a pattern indicating amusement. Well, it seems this predator has teeth in more ways than one. He laughed, a sound like tinkling crystal. You're right, of course. A little test to see if the rumors of human emotional volatility were true. And? Krag asked. Inconclusive. But the day is young. Zorn turned to Plink. I look forward to dinner. I understand you've prepared a special program? Plink, who had been holding his breath for so long that several of his tentacles had changed color, exhaled in relief. Yes, Ambassador. A full cultural presentation including. The station's alarm system suddenly blared to life, cutting him off mid-sentence. Red emergency lights began pulsing throughout the room. Critical system failure detected, announced the station's artificial intelligence in multiple languages. Containment breach in sectors 7 through 12. All personnel evacuate to emergency shelters. Krag caught Plink's eye across the chaos of the suddenly panicking room. For once, the administrator wasn't looking at him with fear but with desperate hope. Evacuation protocols on space stations existed on the optimistic assumption that emergencies would unfold in an orderly fashion. Reality, as usual, had other ideas. Diplomats and station personnel crowded the corridors, moving in contradictory directions as emergency lighting bathed everything in pulsing red. The station's AI continued its unhelpful announcements. Partial atmospheric venting in progress. Gravitational systems compromised. Please proceed calmly to designated shelters. Administrator Plink found Krag amidst the chaos, all pretense of professional distance abandoned as he clung to the human's arm with 3 tentacles. The primary coolant system has ruptured, Plink explained, voice pitched high with stress. It's venting into the station's atmosphere and affecting multiple systems simultaneously. That's the same system I was fixing yesterday, Krag noted. The coupling shouldn't have failed again so quickly. Irrelevant now. We need to get everyone to the shelters before a violent shudder ran through the station, throwing several evacuees off their feet. Krag remained standing, his dense Earth-evolved body naturally compensating for the sudden shift. Before that happens, Plink finished weakly. Ambassador Zorn pushed his way toward them, his usual pomposity replaced by genuine alarm. Administrator. My delegation requires immediate evacuation. I demand priority access to escape pods. With respect, Ambassador, our protocols call for sheltering in place. The escape pods are only 4. Another tremor, stronger this time. The lights flickered ominously. For exactly this situation, Zorn insisted. I will not risk diplomatic personnel. Krag surveyed the growing panic around them. The coolant vapors are spreading through the ventilation system. If they reach critical concentration, they'll affect neural function in most species. How do you know that? Plink asked. I read the hazard manuals. It's part of my job. But the manuals are thousands of pages of technical. Earth education, Krag reminded him with a tight smile. We're good at learning how not to die. Drell appeared, pushing through the crowd with surprising determination for his small size. Krag, the maintenance team can't reach the primary coupling. The corridors flooded with coolant vapor. Ambassador Zorn's scales paled. Coolant vapor? The kind that causes nervous system failure and painful death in most civilized species? That's the one, Krag confirmed grimly. How long before it reaches critical concentration, Drell? 20 minutes maximum. The atmospheric processors can't filter it fast enough. Krag made a quick decision. Plink, get everyone to the central hub. It has independent air filtration. Drell, find Vexa and tell her to bring breathing apparatus for different physiologies. Prioritize the species most vulnerable to the coolant. What about you? Plink asked, already knowing the answer. I'm going to fix the coupling. But the corridor is flooded with toxic. I'm human, Krag reminded him. We're good at surviving things that should kill us. Without waiting for further discussion, Krag sprinted toward the maintenance access, leaving the administrator and ambassador staring after him in bewilderment. "Is it actually immune to the coolant?" Zorn asked. "Not immune," Plink replied. "Just resistant enough to function where we would die." He paused. "It's an Earth thing." The maintenance corridor was already hazy with bluish vapor when Krag arrived. He pulled his shirt up over his nose and mouth, not ideal protection, but better than nothing. Earth's varying atmospheric conditions throughout its history had given humans remarkably adaptable respiratory systems compared to species that evolved in stable environments. The coupling junction was visible at the far end, coolant spraying in a fine mist from the failed connection. Tools in hand, Krag pushed forward, each breath becoming more difficult as the vapor thickened. His eyes burned. His lungs protested. But he kept moving. This was what humans did. They endured. They pushed through pain. They survived. By the time he reached the coupling, his vision was blurring and his muscles were beginning to tremble from toxin exposure. But his hands, those remarkably dexterous appendages that could both crush and create, remained steady as he worked to seal the breach. In the central hub, the delegation huddled in increasingly cramped conditions as more evacuees arrived. Dr. Vexay distributed breathing apparatus while explaining the situation to Ambassador Zorn. "The coolant affects synaptic transmission in most species," she said. "Even brief exposure causes paralysis, followed by systematic shutdown of vital functions." "And the human? What effect will it have on him?" "Significant discomfort. Possible temporary neural impairment. But his physiology," she paused, searching for the right words. Zorn finished for her. "His physiology evolved on Earth." "Precisely. Earth's organisms developed redundant systems and remarkable toxin resistance due to their planet's chaotic conditions. Their bodies don't just survive, they adapt to damage. They rebuild. From an evolutionary perspective, it's simultaneously primitive and extraordinary." The station shuddered again, but less violently this time. The emergency lights flickered, then stabilized. A moment later, the AI announced coolant leak contained, atmospheric filtration restoring optimal conditions, emergency status downgraded. A cheer rose from the assembled crowd. Relief surged through the room until someone asked the question, "Where's the human?" 20 minutes later, medical personnel carried Krag into the central hub on a stretcher. His skin was pale, his breathing labored, but he was conscious and, remarkably, attempting to sit up despite the restraints. "Stop moving," ordered the medical officer, a Trebian with 6 eyes and infinite patience. "Your system is still processing toxins." "Did it work?" Krag asked, voice raspy. "Is everyone okay?" Administrator Plink pushed forward. "Everyone is safe. The station is stabilizing." He hesitated, then added with genuine emotion, "Thanks to you." Ambassador Zorn approached the stretcher, his diplomatic entourage forming a protective circle around him despite the clearly incapacitated state of the dangerous human. "You willingly exposed yourself to conditions that would kill any civilized being," Zorn observed, his tone uncharacteristically respectful. "Why?" "Why?" Krag managed a weak shrug. "It's my job, and I was the only one who could do it." "Because you're human." "Because I was raised on Earth." Zorn's scales shifted to a thoughtful blue. "I've studied Earth's evolutionary history. Your planet should never have produced sentient life. The conditions were too harsh, too changeable. Most worlds that develop intelligence do so through stability, allowing minds to evolve without the constant pressure of survival." "Earth had different ideas," Krag said. "Indeed." Zorn's expression changed, displaying the Merovian equivalent of dawning realization. "Your species doesn't just survive hostile conditions. You're shaped by them. The very harshness that should have prevented intelligence instead forged a different kind of mind, one that doesn't just endure chaos but thrives within it." Krag attempted a smile, forgetting momentarily that the expression frightened most aliens. To his surprise, Zorn didn't flinch. "That's why humans seem monstrous to the rest of us," the ambassador continued. You're not evolutionary mistakes, you're evolutionary responses to conditions we can barely imagine. Your strength, your durability, your adaptability, they're not primitive traits. They're highly specialized adaptations to a world that demands them. Dr. Vexe, who had been monitoring Krag's vital signs, looked up in surprise. Ambassador, that's precisely what my research suggests. Humans aren't evolutionary throwbacks, they're specialized survival experts from an environment that breeds resilience. The word hung in the air, replacing monster with something approaching respect. 3 days later, as the diplomatic shuttle prepared for departure, Theta-9 barely resembled the same station. Emergency repairs had restored all systems to functionality, though maintenance crews would be addressing secondary issues for weeks to come. More noticeably different, however, was the way station personnel interacted with their resident human. Maintenance report, Mr. Daniels said, a Venubian technician, making direct eye contact without the usual trembling. We've replaced the secondary couplings as you recommended. Good work, Krag replied, signing the digital clipboard. The technician didn't flinch when their hands briefly made contact, a small change that meant everything. Near the docking bay, Ambassador Zorn was delivering his final assessment to Administrator Plink, whose tentacles were for once arranged in a dignified configuration rather than anxious writhing. Theta-9 has demonstrated remarkable crisis management capabilities, Zorn was saying. My report to the Galactic Council will reflect this accordingly. Thank you, Ambassador, Plink replied, practically glowing with relief. We pride ourselves on being prepared for any eventuality. Indeed. Particularly your decision to incorporate a human into your staff. Zorn's scales shimmered with amusement. A rather forward-thinking approach to station safety, wouldn't you say? Plink's color briefly shifted to embarrassed purple before he composed himself. Mr. Daniels has always been a valued team member. Of course. Zorn nodded knowingly. My colleagues and I have been discussing the potential benefits of human consultants for our own outposts. Their unique perspectives on crisis management could prove invaluable. Krag approached, moving with the slight caution of someone still recovering from toxin exposure. The delegation members, who days earlier had recoiled from his presence, now nodded respectfully. Ambassador, Krag greeted. Safe travels. Ah, human Daniels, or may I simply call you Krag now? Zorn extended all 4 hands in the traditional Merovian gesture of equals. I wanted to thank you personally before departing. Just doing my job. You did considerably more than that. You've changed perspectives, mine included. Zorn looked thoughtful. For centuries, the galactic community has viewed Earth as an evolutionary aberration, producing species too aggressive and resilient for civilized society. We assumed that intelligence could only flourish in environments of stability and peace. Earth's never been big on stability, Krag admitted. And yet, it produced beings capable of not just surviving, but thriving amidst chaos, Zorn continued. Beings who run toward danger rather than away from it, who adapt to toxins rather than succumbing, who view their physical resilience not as a curse but as a tool for helping others. Krag shifted uncomfortably under the praise. You're making humans sound noble. Most of us just muddle through. Perhaps the most remarkable human trait is your inability to recognize how extraordinary you actually are. Zorn's scales rippled with something approaching fondness. The Galactic Council will be receiving my full report on humanity's unique contributions to interspecies cooperation. Does this mean Earth might finally get that membership application approved? Krag asked. Let's not get carried away, Zorn replied with diplomatic caution. But I will say that my recommendation will be to establish more cultural exchange programs. The galaxy has much to learn from Earth's perspective. Dr. Vexe bustled over, her skin cycling through excited color patterns. Ambassador, I've completed my preliminary analysis of human Daniels' physiological response to the crisis. The data is fascinating. Did you know his cellular repair mechanisms accelerated by 47% during peak stress? No other known species demonstrates such adaptive. Dr. Krag interrupted gently. Maybe save the dissection of my biology for your research papers? Of course, sorry. Vex's skin flushed embarrassed orange. Old habits. I just meant to say you're remarkable, but not in a monstrous way, or in a wonderfully specialized way. I'll take that as a compliment, Krag said with a smile, a full, unrestrained human smile that, for once, didn't send anyone into cardiac arrest. As final boarding calls echoed through the docking bay, Ambassador Zorn made his farewells to the station leadership. Drell darted through the crowd to reach Krag's side. Is it true? The young Proximan asked breathlessly. Are they going to bring more humans to the station? I doubt it, Krag replied. But they might stop treating me like I'm going to eat someone. That's disappointing. I was hoping for more humans to learn from. Drell looked up at Krag with unabashed admiration. Do you think I could visit Earth someday, just to see it? Krag imagined Drell small, fragile, gentle Drell trying to navigate Earth's punishing gravity and chaotic atmospheric conditions. Earth's pretty rough on non-humans. But maybe someday we'll have proper exchange programs. I'd wear an environmental suit. I've been designing one based on your physiology readings. Drell's enthusiasm was infectious. I want to see the place that makes people who run into danger instead of away from it. The boarding announcement for the diplomatic shuttle repeated, more urgently this time. Ambassador Zorn made his way toward the airlock, but paused beside Krag. One final question, if you don't mind, the ambassador said. Throughout this ordeal, you never once showed fear. Not when facing the toxic corridor, not when endangering yourself. Is that typical of humans? Or are you exceptional even among your kind? Krag thought about it. Humans feel fear just like anyone else. We just have a long history of doing things anyway. Fascinating. Zorn's scales shifted to thoughtful blue. Most species evolve to avoid danger. Yours evolved to overcome it. He extended his upper right hand. The galaxy may not be ready for many humans, but I believe it was ready for you, Krag Daniels of Earth. Krag shook the offered hand carefully, conscious of his strength. Safe travels, Ambassador. Try not to spread too many rumors about humans. We're really not that interesting. On the contrary, Zorn replied with a final shimmer of his scales. You're the most interesting aberration the galaxy has seen in millennia. After the diplomatic shuttle departed, Theta-9 gradually returned to its version of normal, with one significant difference. The human was no longer the station's secret shame, kept away from important visitors. Instead, Krag found himself included in briefings, consulted on safety protocols, and occasionally asked to demonstrate his impressive Earth adaptations for curious visitors. 3 months after the delegation's visit, Krag received an official communication from the Galactic Council. He read it in his quarters, away from the curious eyes of his co-workers. In recognition of exceptional service and as part of new cultural exchange initiatives, human Krag Daniels is hereby appointed as Theta-9's official human liaison officer. Additionally, Earth's application for Galactic Observer status has been approved for preliminary review. Krag smiled at the formal language that essentially meant we're slightly less terrified of humans now. It wasn't full galactic citizenship, but it was a start. A recognition that perhaps being built differently didn't make one a monster, just differently adapted. That evening in the station's recreation area, Krag joined a mixed group of species for the first ever Earth Cultural Night. He had decorated the space with images of Earth's diverse landscapes and brought samples of replicated Earth cuisine that wouldn't poison non-human digestive systems. Administrator Plink, considerably more relaxed around Krag these days, sampled a mild version of ice cream with 2 tentative tentacles. Fascinating texture. And you say humans consume this purely for pleasure, not nutrition? One of our many evolutionary quirks, Krag replied. We eat for enjoyment as much as survival. Truly bizarre, Plink said, but he reached for another sample nonetheless. As Krag looked around at the gathering at Vexi, enthusiastically explaining human biology without using the word horrifying once, at Drell proudly wearing a t-shirt with Future Earth Visitor, written on it, At station personnel who now met his eyes without flinching, he felt something he hadn't experienced since leaving Earth. Longing. They had called him a monster. He had said he was just raised on Earth. Now they understood that sometimes what looks like a monster is simply something evolved for a world they couldn't imagine, a world that had prepared him not just to survive, but to help others do the same. Not a monster after all, just human.